mean, college football, insane weekend. Huge games everywhere. Few upsets, really big upsets happening. Um, yeah, exciting games. A lot going on all fronts, and just another crazy weekend with college football. Doesn't disappoint. Last year a lot of crazy upsets, a lot of crazy games. We're kind of picking up right from where we left off. Um, biggest game of the week, the Alabama Texas game, right?
Yeah.
A lot of hype going into it. Huge point spread. Alabama favored by 20. Texas comes in and they get busy. Quinn Ewers lighting it up. Um, you know, was looking great out there until he gets knocked out the game, and then you know Hudson Card is in there hobbling around, keeping them in there. Alabama showed some flaws, right?
Yeah.
Texas was able to keep this game close. They really should have won it. You could point to a bunch of reasons and a bunch of plays
Right.
that should have had Texas coming out with a win during this game. Um, but yeah, I mean, just a great performance by Texas. I mean, you gotta think if Quinn Ewers doesn't get knocked out, they
They have
probably
a
win this
chance.
game.
Yeah, they have a puncher's chance.
Yeah, they matched Alabama. They brought their defense. Their defense came to play. They were able to make some plays on the outside with their skill position players, and um, yeah, I mean it was one of those where if you're Texas, you gotta be happy with it,
Right.
but not let it
I
go
think
to your head too much.
yeah, I think that's what Sark said too, because it
Mm-hmm.
gives you. I mean, you go against one of the best teams in the country with Alabama, and it kind of gives you a standing of where you're at with your team, where they stand with big time schools. I certainly think they'll put up a fight against Georgia. Again, Quinn Ewers had a great game. Had Quinn Ewers been able to finish it off, who knows? I mean, but then again, obviously, there's always a different game plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, Bryce Young showed a lot of promise. He showed that he can be tested and can rise up to the
Yeah,
occasion.
tons of resilience.
So that was a good thing. And then on top of that, Alabama was playing very sloppy. They had 15 penalties. Over 100 yards of penalties is never good for any game. Usually if that's the case, you come to a point where it's like these close games happen, and had Texas capitalized on that, this may have not been a close game.
Mm-hmm.
So if Alabama plays this way against Georgia, I think they're getting blown out the water, because
Yeah.
Georgia, they're able to get things going on offense. They're able to consistently get to the punch, get to where they have to get to offensively. But I think injuries aside, I think they put together a great game against Bama. So
Yeah, for sure.
definitely shows where they're going with that program and what Sark's doing there. So
Yeah, yeah. Big time performance by Texas. Didn't get the win, but you know, kind of putting Texas on the map little by little as we go on. And yeah, be excited to see where Texas ends up, towards the end of the season and moving on to future years. Another big game, uh two SEC opponents, two SEC East opponents in Florida and Kentucky.
oh, they're
Uh,
both in the East.
yeah, they're both
Okay.
SEC East. And Anthony Richardson, a lot of hype coming into this. You know, after a spectacular performance the week before, came in and he just really wasn't able to get the job done. Kind of a drop off with you know, on his performance, just because everyone's holding him to such high standards after that last week, um, coming in and absolutely taking over the game. It's kind of hard to put that all on his shoulders for him to have to live up to it. But Kentucky comes in there,
Fights
fights
with it
hard,
though.
gets the win on a tough road environment against some rivals, and big time win for Kentucky. And if we're talking quarterbacks, Will Levis, another guy who came in with a lot of preseason hype, um, kind of really living up to it at this point. Maybe
Yeah.
not in the rocket ship way that Anthony Richardson did to start off the year, but
Right.
he's proven, in the few weeks so far that okay, he could throw the ball, he could take care of the ball. He's getting his team wins, and
Right.
Kentucky definitely heading in the right direction, and proving that they are a football school, not just a basketball school anymore,
Yeah.
and a team that can compete in the SEC, right? You want to talk about the best and hardest division and conference to compete in. You talking about the SEC, and they're competing over there. So
Yeah. So I think Mark Stoops has that team. He's rallied them together. Will Levis, he's doing great. He dealt with some pressure. I think Kentucky's defense definitely had a lot more pressure on Anthony Richardson, which kind of rattled him a little bit, kind of put him in a space where it's like, okay, we don't. Let's see how he handles pressure outside of just like let's like he can his ability to just scramble out of the pocket, extend plays, be able to do bigger things. When you get to the point of like, okay, the play's a little bit dead, let's see what we could do to keep it alive. Anthony Richardson, I think he's gonna show some struggle, but I think he'll eventually they'll get back on track. I mean, Florida's gonna have some easy opponents also, so
mhm.
with those easy opponents, that's when you kind of capitalize on the fundamentals of things and try to clean those things up. But I think overall, just like you said, Will Levis played a great game. So those are things that can kind of grab from this Kentucky Florida game. And to play in Florida is tough, just like you were
Yeah,
saying last
tough.
week.
Yeah,
Tough environment
tough
to be in
environment.
Gainesville.
Great
So
home field advantage for them.
right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. We had South Carolina and Arkansas. Arkansas wins, 44-30. Two teams in a bit of a similar place coming into this season. Both teams that were kind of a surprise to some, getting some wins and building some momentum last year, trying to keep that momentum going. Um, and this game just kind of showed Arkansas is just a little bit ahead of South Carolina. Uh, they had the better players. They become maybe a bigger, I would say, because both are transfer destinations now. You could see by the players that they got in the transfer portal, but Arkansas maybe a little bit more enticing, maybe getting more of the better players, and just getting a hard fought win here. Their run game spectacular,
Yeah.
dominant.
That seems to be the trend with Arkansas.
Yeah,
Because even aside from this year, the last year, the
yeah.
year before that, they had the leading rusher in the SEC. They had
Mhm.
Raheem Boyd. He was
Mhm.
actually on Last Chance U, and then he transferred from Indy to Arkansas, and he led the SEC in rushing. So I mean, I think they kind of stick with that identity. A lot
Yeah.
of these teams, they kind of you have the air out teams like, say for example, like Texas Tech. They're heavy pass team.
Yeah.
I think Arkansas is obviously they bring it to the ground, and yeah, I think generally speaking, they just were able to be the better team that day. And Raheem Sanders had a huge game, 2 touchdowns, had I'm pretty sure well over 100 yards, and Spencer Rattler played good, but I don't think he played good enough. But I think he's getting to that point where, just like you said before, he's going to show why he was a great prospect coming out of high school. So
For sure. Another big game, Tennessee Pitt. This one was one I was definitely keeping an eye on. Figured it would be a good game. I did expect Tennessee to find a way to pull it out, but it turned into a sloppy game. Both teams were battling it out. Tennessee comes out with a hard fought victory in overtime. But yeah, I mean they showed that they could win ugly. They're trending up now. They building on last year where they were a program in the dark ages, and Hendon Hooker comes and he gets an opportunity there and he starts lighting up the offense and showing some efficiency, and now they're getting wins on the road against teams that are Pitt's a great defensive team, right?
Pitt's a good
They're
team
a
for
hard
sure.
nosed team. They come in there. They're not going to give you anything easy, and they made Tennessee work for it, and Tennessee found a way to get it done. So
Yeah,
congrats to them.
that was a big overtime game, and had they had their starting quarterback, you never know. Maybe that outcome is different for Pitt. Maybe Keaton Slovis wins them the game, and they are able to beat Tennessee, beat an SEC team, and just overall, I mean, it was the thing with these kinds of games, it's like when it gets to overtime, it's anybody's game. So when it gets to overtime, you kind of need your key players to make big time plays and big moments. So I think when you get to that point, when you're in an overtime game, overtime thriller, that's when big players step up. That's when, I'm sure a lot of NFL scouts look for, like, okay, this guy has that ick factor. So I think that's what we kind of saw with that Tennessee Pitt game. Is it was a good game, but we just, you never know what can happen if somebody doesn't go down.
For sure. Texas Tech finds a way to get a win over Houston. This one was not too surprising because Texas Tech has that high-powered offense. They're gonna put up points. Usually, the question is their defense, right? Can they stop anyone enough to get a win? They were able to this time against Houston. Houston's a really good team. A lot of people were high on Houston coming into this season. A team that people thought can make some noise, maybe make a New Year's Six Bowl, kind of represent the G5 as one of the better teams out of the group of 5 teams. But they fall to Texas Tech. They went. Texas Tech gets that win at home. They showed they could outlast a team like Houston. And Houston, solid team, right?
Yeah.
Defense,
Clayton Tune,
solid.
Great quarterback.
Clayton Tune, great quarterback, veteran quarterback, solid defensive line. They have various weapons. They're pretty good all over, especially for a G5 team. It's the reason why they were making a lot of noise coming into this year. But Texas Tech finds a way, and if you're not paying attention, you might think, oh, why Texas Tech? But their offense is high powered, and they're trying to make some noise this year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they had well over 40 passing attempts, and that's kind of what they're notorious for, just having a really good air out offense. And Houston did what they could do. They kept it close. They had a really close game last week against UTSA, and they were able to really bring that together and win that game. So, I think just like you said, Texas Tech, it's just a lot to handle with that offense. So,
right, and another close game against some good teams, Baylor and BYU. This was a spectacular game. Baylor was favored in this game. They were ranked higher. But yeah, I mean, it's time to kind of put some respect on BYU's name. They come back, tons of returning production, another veteran quarterback coming back. They play hard, good on offense and defense. They can play, and they showed it. Playing against Baylor and pulling out that win. As the underdog, they were underdog last week. Got the win as well, so probably time for people to start taking notice and respect BYU is coming to play every week.
And I think just like you mentioned last week with the experience that kind of set in, just in general, they have leadership in that program. So Jaren Hall showed great leadership, commanded the offense, took control of the game. They didn't really get going until maybe towards the end of the half, but they had a huge touchdown to end the half, and the entire crowd at that stadium was just going crazy. So I think that kind of rattled the Baylor as well. And just in general, when you have leadership in that type of environment, it's just it's good. They ended that game. And that game shouldn't have gone into an overtime. So they should have they should have won the regulation. And the BYU kicker missed 2 game-winning field goals. At the end, you see this guy hugging him, and you don't really see that often, especially in the college football landscape that we're in now. You see last year, we kind of go back to Spencer Rattler. It's Spencer Rattler, they weren't, he wasn't really rooting for the person that was taking his spot. I mean, granted, he's taking your spot. You're an NFL prospect at the time, and you're looking to kind of make your mark in that kind of realm in college football. But I think NFL scouts see that, and as a quarterback, that's huge.
And also, even before you even get to the NFL, I mean, smart move by Jaron Hall, because you have to recognize you're gonna need that kicker.
Right.
That you need that guy throughout the rest of the year, right? Jaron Hall is a QB prospect that, you know, we see it all the time. We've seen it with Kenny Pickett last year. He comes in, he goes to work, he puts up numbers, and voila, he's a first round pick. Jaron Hall has that ability, right? Will he be a first round pick? I don't know. He has a lot of work to do that. Right. But even just to be a third, fourth round pick, right?
It's still big.
However he wants to go, it's still important for him, in terms of prospects wise to get to the NFL, and for his own college career, right? He's still playing for something. He still wants to win. So, recognizing that, we need our kicker's confidence high. You don't want your kicker being a head case, because once that happens, we see that all the time, whether it be college or NFL. Those guys get rolling and kicks go all over the place, and you're missing kicks left and right.
Yeah, and next thing you know, the next week you're waived because you missed a few kicks. So
it could be a disaster. So, good veteran leadership by Jaron Hall, and good win by BYU. Another game, we mentioned UTSA earlier. They went up against Army. They pulled out a close win. UTSA, I'm not surprised anymore with them winning close. This is kind of their MO at this point. They fight hard. They play well. The game gets tight. They believe in themselves against just about anybody in the country, that if it's a close game, they're going to pull it out. And that's what they do this time. Yeah. They go in and they get a win. Against the Army team that fought them hard. Army kind of was doing a lot of the things that UTSA does. Bounce back late. Pick up timely scores, and they made UTSA fight, but UTSA finds a way again.
Right, and just down to the wire kind of thing. Their quarterback is great. Yeah, I think you look at their quarterback, and again, a lot of these quarterbacks seem to be handling a lot of adversity early on, especially early on in the season. I mean, it's only week 2, and a lot of these quarterbacks are already being tested. How do you bounce back? How do you handle playing from behind? That's huge, because anybody could play with a lead, and then, it's kind of banking more so on your play calling and more so on you keeping control of the pace of the game. But when you're playing behind and your back's to the wall, you really see who has that it factor, who really has that kind of dog in them to just be able to pull away in those big games. So that was a big game by UTSA.
Yeah, for sure. We talked about some big games, but we can't forget some huge upsets this week. Teams just getting knocked off in different ways. One of the major ones was Notre Dame losing to Marshall, and not a good performance by Notre Dame. I mean, Marshall just straight up looked like the better team. If you took the names off the front of their jerseys, you would think Marshall was probably the bigger school, with more resources. They came in and
they played hard.
They played hard, and they took a tough game to Notre Dame, and they weren't giving up an inch in that game, and they came out with the win. And usually it's kind of like a fluky kind of thing, right? You lose off like a missed field goal or a block kick, or you lose the turnover battle, or Marshall, they just came to play, and they just straight up beat them.
Yeah, Marshall looked like they were just a more well-oiled team. Their run game got going early. When you have a great run game, everything seems to flow. It opens up play action, opens up so much in your offense when you're able to run the ball effectively. And Notre Dame's defense just didn't look existent. So I think that's kind of like something that they have to capitalize on. And it's kind of odd because it's like, okay, they played incredible against Ohio State defensively. I mean, the score doesn't necessarily say that, but had you watched the game and, had you actually, it took Ohio State a long time to get going with that. So I think Marcus Freeman has some things that he has to really work on with his program, but I mean, overall, I think it's just gonna really be more of a test for him.
Right, and everyone kind of knew this year, kind of like a rebuilding year. I mean, it's Marcus Freeman's first year as a head coach, right? They don't have really weapons on the outside. They're starting a quarterback, for the first time, a new quarterback. They're breaking him in. So this is just part of the road that Marcus Freeman has to take. I mean, I'm still high on him as a coach. But yeah, that is still a bad loss. He's been killing it in recruiting on the recruiting trail.
Right.
Grabbing a bunch of
starts.
Yeah, and that's where it starts. But you do have to wonder, a loss to Marshall is different than a loss to USC or something like that, right? So, how will Marcus Freeman respond, right? If he doesn't let it become a total downslide from here, he should be fine. But otherwise, you might have to wonder, okay, well, he was recruiting good, but maybe that bad loss to Marshall might sway a recruit or two not to go to Notre Dame.
Right.
So who knows? But more upsets. Like we said, huge upset week. Appalachian State takes out Texas A&M.
That was huge.
This one was a crazy one. I mean, yeah, huge game. Texas A&M. Everyone figured there was going to be no way they'd lose to App State. I mean, if they would have struggled, one thing, but to lose to App State the way they did, they cannot put together any offense.
Their offense looked stagnant, and when they started to get going, it was like something bad just happened.
I mean, their offense is, they're still running. Jimbo Fisher doesn't want to adapt. Like, he doesn't want to change his offense, and that's what he takes pride in, right? He takes pride as being an offensive guy,
right?
But he wants to run this outdated offense, and then he runs into a team like App State, who don't get it twisted. They have a lot of
competed last week with North Carolina. So.
They compete hard, but they also people sleep on them because they're not a Power 5 school, but they have a lot of players who are NFL type prospects, right? What they're going to either be drafted or get invited to NFL camps and get a shot, to make a roster if they could perform. And they played hard and they didn't back down from Texas A&M and they took it to them. I mean, Texas A&M, they got to get their stuff together.
Yeah.
Best recruiting class of all time last year.
Way more 5-star recruits than App State.
Yeah, I mean, what's
kind of odd too is just like you talked about, it was like this outdated offense. You throw the ball in the college football landscape where things are so much pass heavy. Granted, you do have your teams like Arkansas that run the ball a lot. It's like you throw the ball 20 times, you're not really putting yourself in position to put up points like that. And then on top of that, when they did start getting going, they would turn the ball over. So it's not like they had much opportunity to kind of get things going. Appalachian State had the game for over 40, or had the ball for over 40 minutes of the game. That's the majority of the game.
They dominated time of possession. Yeah,
so it's
absolutely dominated.
How do you work against that?
So well, the problem is App State, like I said, one, they came to play. Two, they're a well-coached team.
Yeah,
three, they have the players to compete if you let them. I mean, we saw them compete against North Carolina. Texas A&M should be a better team, right? And it's always, especially how, like we mentioned, best recruiting class of all time last year. Those guys are still freshmen. A lot of them are still not playing, but they still been recruiting at a high level years ahead of that, right? Yeah. And App State comes in and you run your stale offense. Jimbo Fisher doesn't want to do the whole window dressing with the motion and all this, but there's a reason why people started putting that in their offenses, right? And they're a decent defense. I mean, they have, we talked about they have good talent. They have, some top level guys on their defense that are, you can't just let them pin back their ears and go after your quarterback like that.
You can't. And I think the problem is like, granted, you can kind of have that offense in play, but you have to have it well coached. You have to have it be a well-oiled machine. If you're gonna be, it's kind of like if you're gonna be a power eye offense, which is kind of non-existent in the spread offense kind of situation that we are in with college football, then you have to at least be able to run it effectively. And if you can't run it effectively and your players aren't running, or if your players aren't wanting to play for you, I think it was just simply he got out coached. And it's kind of like, what's really going on in Texas A&M, like with Jimbo Fisher? So
Look, and
I don't know.
and they're they gotta pick it up because they're gonna be in a world of trouble. This is transfer portal era, right?
Yeah.
You get all those prospects,
They'll leave in a heartbeat.
they'll be gone, and the whole rumors of them getting paid all this money. Who knows who got paid? Who knows who didn't? But if
Transfer portal,
if your loyalty to Texas A&M was because they paid you, and then you're losing, you're getting out of there.
Oh, he's just there. He's just there for the money.
You could go get a check where you want to be and win. Why do you have to be at A&M, right?
Well, it depends. It depends. That's a whole nother subject that we could get into maybe another time. But
yeah, I mean, another upset. Washington State goes in and beats Wisconsin. This one was a sneaky one, right? I looked at this game so many times last week thinking, I feel like Washington State's offense will be able to pull this off. But then I look at the spread, and Wisconsin was favored by, 2 touchdowns. And it's like, And, it gave me some hesitancy as far as like, is there something about Wisconsin that I don't know? You know what I mean? And yeah, sure enough, Washington State comes in. Not only do they cover the spread, they outright win. And yeah, I mean,
it's kind of surprising too because not for nothing, Washington State didn't have the ball that much. And it was a messy game, but Wisconsin like if you watch the game, realistically speaking, Wisconsin should have won that game. They had the majority of the time. They had the ball. They were in more control of the game, but it just seemed to slip away from them. And it's kind of like you kind of question it. It's like, how is it that these teams? I think generally speaking, it just shows that college football, it's really kind of like at any given Sunday kind of situation.
I mean, it always is. It always has been, right?
But it's to another level this year.
Well, we know because last year was all over the place. Teams dropping games when you never could see them. But it's a product of a few things now. We started with the COVID era where teams can retain players that extra year that doesn't count against their eligibility.
Yeah, like
you bring back
their fifth year.
Yeah, 6 years. You got 35-year-old men playing these games nowadays.
It's semi-pro now.
But crazy. So we have the same effect that we had last year with a lot of older veteran players, right, coming back. And then you have the transfer portal where teams could go in, like Washington State did. They went and they got a Cameron Ward. And he comes in and, he plays well, right? And all these teams, they're able to fill holes, and they don't have to only look towards recruits where they have to develop them for 2-3 years before they can, get on the field. You could go get a guy who's maybe more ready and plug a hole real quick that you need and go from there. So, but yeah, I mean, hats off to Washington State. Cameron Ward's is playing well, and they're a team trying to make some noise this year. A lot of people, not a lot of people following the FCS, so a lot of people don't know much about Cameron Ward, but that guy lit it up last year in an air raid system. Comes over as his head coach, gets a offensive coordinator job there at Washington State, and they put in work and they come out with a big win against a solid Big Ten team. So good for them. And then we have other upset of the week. Nebraska losing to Georgia Southern.
Georgia Southern.
And this was a funny one. This game, I looked at it and I said, I'm staying away from this game because I do not trust Nebraska and I do not trust Scott Frost.
Yeah.
And not only do they not cover the spread,
right?
They outright lose to a team, Georgia Southern. I mean, I'm
They're
sorry,
in the
man.
Sun Belt Conference, right?
Yeah, you cannot, if you're Nebraska, lose to Georgia Southern, especially after the performances you've been having the past weeks. I mean, you haven't looked good at all, this team. You know what I mean?
It explains it.
The best they look. I mean, the most consistency they could show is through like a quarter or so. Like
Right.
they can't put together stretches of good football. I don't know how Scott Frost became so bad. I mean, this guy was when he got hired, it was a solid coaching hire, right? He had UCF playing well, and he looked like a coach on the rise, and Nebraska snatches him up and hopes to turn the program around and bring them back to more, something closer to their glory days than now. And I don't know, he just can't get the job done, and they wasted no time. They fired him. He would have got half the money
Right.
that he was getting if they just would have waited, like an extra few weeks. They couldn't even wait. They said, whatever, we're gonna pay the extra $7.5 million to get this guy the hell out of here. I mean, if that doesn't say all that needs to be said.
What a week for the Sun Belt Conference with all these upsets, though.
Yeah, I mean, Sun Belt, they're gonna want to they're gonna want an automatic bid in that new playoff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, congrats to all these teams getting upsets. I mean,
sucks for Scott Frost.
Yeah, Scott Frost is gone, and
hopefully he finds a job somewhere.
And all that talk about Nebraska last year. Oh, they're maybe the best 3 win team we've seen. All these close games, they lost by all these 1 possession games, and they just continue losing. Everyone's like, there's no way this can continue. There's no. I mean, they're losing.
The best 3-win team. That's how you know you're. Yeah. And it sucks because they've been like, it's like Nebraska, Iowa. They're known for being like those kind of like, that's where I'm gonna get my lineman. That's where I'm gonna get my tight end. I know that's where the players in the trenches are developed at. So it just sucks that they these programs just get to where they are now.
Yeah, for sure. Some other games, just to run through them. Iowa State gets that win over Iowa. They've been trying to get that win for a while. Finally got it. Iowa, I mean, that team, no offense from them. I mean, just take the under every time. So Iowa State gets the win there. North Carolina gets the win over Georgia State. Duke loses to Northwestern. Surprising for me. I had Northwestern winning this game. Duke pulls it out, though. Congrats to them. Virginia gets destroyed by Illinois. Another one. I had Virginia winning this game easy. But Illinois came to play this game. Their running game is solid, and they pulled out the win here. Kansas gets the win over West Virginia. There was a little bit of whispers about Kansas maybe getting this win, and they got it. They got a win over a solid West Virginia team. West Virginia, went down to the wire with Pitt. But yeah, Kansas gets the win. Good for them. They'll take any win they could get. You know what I'm saying? For a team that's generally always in the bottom of the league, they find a way to get a win here. Wake Forest beats Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, bottom of the SEC team. They put out a performance against Hawaii, but Hawaii might be the worst FBS team. They're certainly one of the worst. And, some people had Vanderbilt winning this game because of, how their offense looked at times earlier in this short season so far. But, they were no match against Wake Forest. Ohio State takes care of business against Arkansas State. We get to see the Buckeyes get back into some kind of rhythm with their offense, put some points up.
Yeah, I think they needed that after that Notre Dame game.
Yeah, they certainly needed that. Georgia, 33-0 against Samford. Nothing more to say about this game, as expected. USC, 41-28 against Stanford. Stanford, not Samford, who Georgia played. And I had USC as the best bets last week to cover
No,
that spread. They were at like -9. You could even get a -8 at some points. They covered that spread no problem. I didn't see any way they weren't. I felt like uh, it was gonna be kind of the coming out party for Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley and all those transfers that they have, and that's what they did. Hawaii lost to Michigan. Michigan pounded them.
that's
Um,
expected.
as expected, as I just mentioned before, Hawaii, one of the worst FBS teams. Um, they let JJ McCarthy shine in this one, and now he'll be the quarterback going forward for Michigan. Clemson takes care of business against Furman. Not much to say here, as expected.
I think they should have blew him out a
Uh,
little bit more though.
well, yeah,
I
I
don't
was
think
gonna
a
say
30,
the only thing you
35 to
might
12
say
is
is
like
you
impressive.
would expect a little bit more from Clemson's offense, but also they haven't been showing it in the other games, so maybe it's just not coming this year. And then we had Oklahoma taking care of business against Kent State, um, 33-3. Um, you know, not much to say here. Just another get right game for Oklahoma.